Get a team lunch receipt, Susan, I said calmly, sliding my corporate card across the table. I need to step outside for a moment. Michael's face drained of color as I made my way through the crowded restaurant. Behind me, I could hear his brother Daniel's nervous laugh. What's with her? The rest of the executive team shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stood on the busy Seattle sidewalk, rain drizzling onto my blazer, and pulled out my phone. With 3 decisive taps, I froze every company account Michael and Daniel thought they controlled. The notification pinged instantly. Administrative. Privileges revoked. Thompson, Michael, Thompson, Daniel. Within seconds, my phone lit up with Michael's desperate call. I declined it, watching through the restaurant window as panic spread across his face. The board meeting scheduled for tomorrow would reveal everything. The shell companies, the diverted contracts, the systematic dismantling of the business I'd built from nothing. My evidence was irrefutable, my timing calculated. As I watched, my husband frantically texting his brother, I felt no satisfaction, only a strange, calm certainty. They always did underestimate me, I whispered to myself as I texted our corporate lawyer. Proceed with the documentation as discussed. 5 years ago, I was just Jessica Davis, a 28-year-old digital marketing specialist with big dreams and an even bigger student loan balance. I'd spent 3 years at one of Seattle's top agencies, learning everything I could about digital strategy while moonlighting as a freelance consultant on weekends. Every extra dollar went toward paying down my debt and building my emergency fund. I lived in a cramped studio apartment in Capitol Hill, ate discount grocery store sushi for dinner more often than I'd like to admit, and spent my free time developing a proprietary analytics platform that I believed could revolutionize how companies tracked their digital marketing ROI. The platform, which I called VisuTrack, started as a simple dashboard I created for my freelance clients. Unlike other analytics tools on the market, VisuTrack could integrate with virtually any digital platform and translate complex data into visual insights even the most tech-phobic executives could understand. Word spread quickly, and soon I had a waiting list of small businesses eager to try my software. That's when I knew it was time to take the leap. I quit my agency job, maxed out my credit cards, and launched Clear Vision marketing from my apartment. The first year was brutal. Sleepless nights, troubleshooting code, cold calling potential clients, and eating nothing but ramen and coffee. But gradually, businesses started to sign up. First locally, then across the West Coast. By year 2, we had our first major client, a national retail chain that increased their conversion rates by 43% within 3 months of implementing VisuTrack. I met Michael Thompson at a tech conference in downtown Seattle where I'd been invited to speak about digital marketing analytics. Tall, with a confident smile and impeccable tailoring, he approached me after my presentation with thoughtful questions about attribution modeling and customer journey mapping. Unlike most of the men who cornered me at these events, he seemed genuinely interested in the technology, not just in networking or flirting. Your platform solves a problem most executives don't even know they have, he said, handing me his business card. I'm the VP of Strategy at Pinnacle Investments. We work with growing tech companies, and I'd love to discuss how we might help Clear Vision reach its potential. Over dinner the following week, our conversation flowed from business to personal. Michael had grown up in Chicago, the son of a successful manufacturing executive. He and his younger brother Daniel had both attended Northwestern, though Michael had pursued business while Daniel studied computer science. After working at several investment firms, Michael had moved to Seattle 5 years earlier to join Pinnacle, specializing in tech investments. What about family? I asked, sipping my wine. My parents still live in Chicago. Dad's semi-retired but can't quite let go of the company. Mom runs 3 different charity boards and is always telling me I work too much. He smiled. Daniel, Followed me out here a few years ago. He's brilliant with technology, but needed a change after his startup flamed out. I helped him land a job at Amazon. What about you? Any family in Seattle? I told him about growing up in Portland with my mom, a high school English teacher who'd raised me alone after my father left when I was 4. She sacrificed everything to give me opportunities, I explained. Worked summers, took extra tutoring jobs so I could go to college. She passed away my senior year, pancreatic cancer. Michael reached across the table and took my hand. His touch was warm, comforting. She'd be incredibly proud of what you've built. Our relationship developed rapidly after that. Michael understood my dedication to clear vision in a way previous boyfriends never had. He didn't complain when I canceled dates because a client needed me, or when I spent weekends hunched over my laptop refining algorithms. Instead, he brought me coffee, offered insights from his business experience, and seemed genuinely excited about my company's growth. 6 months into our relationship, Michael invited me to meet his parents during their visit to Seattle. Robert and Patricia Thompson were staying at the Four Seasons, and we joined them for dinner at Canlis, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Patricia, elegant in Chanel with a perfectly maintained silver bob, assessed me with cool appraisal. As the maitre d' led us to the Thompsons' table, "Jessica," she said, air-kissing my cheeks, "Michael tells us you run some sort of internet business." "Clear Vision Marketing," I corrected politely. "We develop proprietary analytics technology for digital marketing campaigns." Patricia nodded vaguely while Robert, a broad-shouldered man with Michael's same confident smile, asked more specific questions about revenue models and growth projections. I answered confidently, proud of what I'd built. "Impressive for someone so young," Robert said, signaling for more wine. "Though the tech space is volatile. Have you considered bringing on strategic partners? Someone with more established business experience?" "Dad," Michael interjected. "Jessica's company is growing faster than most of the startups Pinnacle invests in. Her client retention rate is nearly perfect." "Yes, but scaling requires different skills than launching," Robert insisted. "No offense, Jessica, but I've seen many promising ventures fail during expansion because the founder couldn't evolve." I maintained my composure, but the comment stung. Throughout dinner, Patricia asked about my family. "Just your mother? No other relatives in business?" "My education? Portland State is regional, isn't it? And my long-term plans." Each question carried a subtle implication that I was somehow lacking despite my success. As we waited for the valet afterward, Michael squeezed my hand. "Sorry about that. They can be old-fashioned, especially Mom. They'll warm up once they know you better." 9 months after we began dating, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands. The ring was stunning, a 3-carat oval diamond that must have cost more than my first year's business revenue. We celebrated with champagne on the balcony of our suite, watching the sunset paint the water gold and pink. "I want to help you take clear vision to heights you've never imagined," Michael whispered, kissing me. "We're going to build something extraordinary together." I believed him completely. We married 6 months later at Suncadia Resort in the Cascade Mountains. The wedding was larger than I'd envisioned. Michael's parents insisted on inviting business associates and family, friends I'd never met. Patricia hired a high-end wedding planner who subtly dismissed most of my preferences as charming but unsuitable for a Thompson wedding. "The Thompson name carries certain expectations," Patricia explained when I objected to the elaborate ice sculpture she'd ordered. "You're part of our family now, and that means upholding traditions." My side of the aisle was sparse, a handful of college friends, some clients who'd become friends, and former colleagues. The disparity between my guests and the Thompson contingent was painfully obvious. During the reception, I overheard one of Patricia's friends remark, "Michael always had a thing for fixer-uppers." Her companion laughed. "Well, at least this one has potential, if she lets Patricia polish her a bit." I pushed the comment aside, focusing instead on Michael's proud smile as he introduced me as my brilliant wife, the CEO of Clear Vision, marketing to everyone we greeted. After the wedding, Michael suggested combining our financial resources. Marriage is a partnership, he said. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Why maintain separate accounts when we're building a life together? It made logical sense, and I agreed, merging my personal accounts with his. We bought a modern home in Madison Park with views of Lake Washington, and I moved Clear Vision into larger offices downtown. The company continued to grow. 20 employees became 40, then 60. We expanded VisuTrack's capabilities and launched a service division that implemented customized marketing strategies based on the platform's insights. Around our first anniversary, Michael proposed a new structure for Clear Vision. "You're working yourself to death," he said one evening as I reviewed client reports. "You need a strategic team to manage growth while you focus on development and vision." He suggested bringing Daniel on as CTO. "He's unhappy at Amazon. Too much bureaucracy. He's brilliant with technology, and he already understands VisuTrack. From all those times, he's helped you troubleshoot." Daniel had indeed become a regular presence at our home, often spending weekends helping me refine code or develop new features. He was quieter than Michael, with the same tall Thompson frame but a more casual style and perpetual stubble. I liked his analytical mind and genuine enthusiasm for technology. "And," Michael continued, "I could step in as COO. Pinnacle would allow me to work part-time while I help streamline Clear Vision's operations. My experience with scaling companies would complement your technical expertise perfectly." The idea made sense. I was stretched thin, handling everything from client relationships to product development. Having trusted family members in leadership roles would allow me to focus on innovation while ensuring the company maintained its values. Within months, the dynamics shifted subtly. Michael instituted formal board meetings where previously we'd had casual team huddles. He hired several executives from his business network, a CFO with Goldman Sachs experience, a director of business development who'd worked with him at Pinnacle. The culture began to change from the collaborative startup environment I'd created to something more corporate and hierarchical. "We're positioning for significant growth," Michael explained when I expressed concerns. "Investors and potential acquirers expect a certain level of professionalism." "Acquirers? I've never mentioned selling Clear Vision," Michael backtracked. Smoothly. "Of course not now, but eventually every successful founder needs an exit strategy. We're just creating options for your future." Daniel threw himself into enhancing VisuTrack, making the platform more scalable and adding enterprise-level features I'd always planned but never had time to implement. He worked long hours and genuinely seemed to care about the product's integrity. If he sometimes deferred to Michael in meetings rather than me, I attributed it to their lifelong bond rather than any intentional undermining. At industry events, I noticed a shift in how I was perceived. Investors and potential partners directed technical questions to Daniel and business inquiries to Michael, despite my title as CEO and founder. Several times I was mistaken for the marketing director rather than the company's creator. When I mentioned this to Michael, he laughed. "Take it as a compliment. It means they see Clear Vision as a serious enterprise, not a one-woman show. Besides, isn't it nice not having to handle everything yourself?" I tried to embrace this perspective, focusing on product innovation while Michael and Daniel managed operations and technology. Clear Vision continued to thrive, securing major clients and industry recognition. But increasingly, I felt like a guest in my own company. The first concrete warning sign came during a client dinner 2 years into our marriage. We were entertaining executives from a potential enterprise client, a national hospitality chain that would be our largest account to date. Michael hosted at Altura, ordering rare wines and speaking confidently about Clear Vision's capabilities. Our proprietary technology was developed by our technical team under Daniel's leadership, he said, gesturing to his brother. The algorithms provide unparalleled insights into customer behavior patterns. I waited for him to mention that I had created the platform, that the core technology was my innovation. He never did. Throughout the dinner, Michael and Daniel presented, themselves as Clear Vision's leadership, occasionally deferring to me on the creative aspects, as if I were merely the head of design rather than the founder and primary architect of our technology. That night at home, I confronted Michael. You completely erased my role in developing VisuTrack. Those clients probably think I'm just the front person while you and Daniel run the real business. Michael looked surprised. I was playing to our strengths. Those executives respect technical and business credentials. They relate better to Daniel and me on those fronts. Because you're men? Don't be ridiculous, Jess. Because Daniel has a computer science degree from Northwestern, and I have an MBA and investment background. We present the image of stability they need to feel confident signing a multi-million-dollar contract. And my image doesn't convey that confidence? Michael softened, wrapping his arms around me. You're brilliant and beautiful and the heart of Clear Vision. But part of my job is reading the room and giving clients what makes them comfortable. Tonight, that meant emphasizing our technical and business infrastructure. Next time, with a different client, we'll highlight your visionary leadership. His explanation was reasonable, yet something felt off. Still, when the hospitality chain signed a 3-year contract the following week, I pushed my concerns aside. Results spoke for themselves, didn't they? During Clear Vision's 4th year, with Michael and Daniel firmly established in leadership roles, I began developing a new product, an AI-enhanced version of VisuTrack that could predict consumer behavior patterns and automatically adjust marketing strategies in real time. The project, codenamed Oracle, represented months of research and late nights coding. I was genuinely excited about its potential to revolutionize the industry. When I presented the concept to our executive team, the reception was oddly muted. Daniel questioned whether the AI components would integrate with our existing architecture. The CFO, Gregory Phillips, expressed concerns about development costs. Michael suggested we table the discussion until a more detailed business case could be prepared. We need to focus on optimizing our current offerings before pursuing new ventures, he said. The board will need convincing that this is the right direction. The board. A governance structure that now included Michael, Daniel, 2 executives, from Michael's network, and me. Despite founding the company, I was regularly outvoted on strategic decisions. That evening, I worked late, refining the Oracle proposal with detailed technical specifications and market analysis. The office was quiet, most employees having left hours earlier. As I headed to the kitchen for more coffee, I passed the conference room where a light was still on. Through the glass wall, I could see Michael and Daniel hunched over laptops with Gregory. Curious about what had them working so late, I moved closer, staying out of sight. Their voices carried through the partially open door. The Seattle offices should be structured under Thompson Digital Holdings, Michael was saying. That gives us control over the physical assets, while the intellectual property transfers to Vertex Solutions. What about the new AI project she's proposing? Gregory asked. If she develops it under Clear Vision, it complicates things. Daniel shook his head. We can't let her build it here. The licensing structure I've implemented means any derivatives of the core technology would fall under the existing agreements. We need her to shelve it for now. Michael nodded. I'll handle Jessica. She trusts me to manage the business side. As long as she can keep playing with her code and being the face of the company, she doesn't look too deeply at the legal structure. And if she starts asking questions? Gregory pressed. She won't, Michael replied with absolute confidence. Jessica's brilliant with technology but naive about business maneuvering. By the time the Chicago expansion is announced, everything will be positioned correctly. Chicago expansion? This was the first I'd heard of any plans to open offices in Chicago. My hands trembled as I silently backed away from the door, returning to my office to gather my things. Whatever they were planning, they clearly didn't intend to include me in the decisions despite my position as CEO and majority shareholder, or at least what I believed was my position as majority shareholder. Instead of confronting them immediately, I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. The fragments of conversation painted a disturbing picture, but I needed more information. If Michael and Daniel were restructuring the company without my knowledge, I needed to understand exactly what they'd done before taking action. The next morning, I arrived at the office early and behaved as if nothing had changed. I smiled through the executive meeting, nodded as Michael outlined quarterly projections, and even had lunch with Daniel to discuss potential enhancements to our existing platform, all while a cold knot of betrayal tightened in my stomach. That night, I waited until Michael was asleep before slipping out of bed and into his home office. His laptop required a password, but after 3 attempts, I guessed correctly. The name of his first dog combined with his birth year. For someone orchestrating a complex business maneuver, he was remarkably predictable in some ways. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Emails between Michael, Daniel, and Gregory detailed a restructuring plan that would effectively transfer ClearVision's valuable assets, including the VisuTrack technology, to a new entity called Vertex Solutions, incorporated in Delaware with Daniel listed as the primary inventor and intellectual property owner. Thomson Digital Holdings, another entity controlled by Michael and his father, would acquire the physical assets and client contracts. A separate email thread discussed the Chicago expansion, not an extension of ClearVision, but a new company called Thomson Analytics that would leverage VisuTrack's technology under license from Vertex. There was no mention of my role in this new venture, though Michael had written to his father that managing Jessica's expectations will be essential to a smooth transition. Most damning of all was a legal memo from a firm I didn't recognize, outlining how my ownership stake in ClearVision could be diluted through a series of seemingly legitimate business transactions. The memo referenced agreements I supposedly had signed, though I had no recollection of many of them. I forwarded the critical emails to my personal account, took screenshots of the legal documents, and carefully returned everything to its original state before slipping back to bed. Lying beside the husband who was systematically stealing my company, I stared at the ceiling until dawn, calculating my next move. The following week passed in a blur of covert investigation. I scheduled coffee with our original corporate counsel, who had been sidelined when Michael brought in his preferred legal team. Under the guise of seeking advice about patents for Oracle, I casually asked about ClearVision's current corporate structure. "That's not my department anymore," she said with obvious regret. After the reorganization last year, the Thomson team moved all the corporate governance work to Bradshaw and Wells. "Of course," I nodded as if I recalled this perfectly. "Michael handles so much of the administrative side now, I sometimes lose track of the details." She hesitated. "Jessica, as your friend rather than your lawyer, have you reviewed the operating agreements you signed during the restructuring? The terms were unusual for a founder in your position." "Unusual how?" She lowered her voice. "I probably shouldn't say this, but I was surprised by how much control you ceded to the board. It's not how I would have advised you to proceed." That afternoon, I contacted a forensic accountant recommended by a tech founder friend, sworn to confidentiality. The story I told was vague. Concerns about financial irregularities, possible unauthorized transactions, but sufficient to engage her services immediately. "I'll need access to all financial records," she explained. "Bank statements, transfer authorizations, corporate filings. The more comprehensive, the better." "What if I don't have direct access anymore?" I asked. She smiled grimly. "As CEO and founder, you have the right to this information. If you're being blocked, that's valuable evidence in itself." Armed with this perspective, I began formally requesting financial documentation from Gregory. He deflected initially, citing confidentiality protocols established by the board. When I persisted, he reluctantly provided heavily redacted reports that revealed little. Michael suggested I direct specific questions to him, Gregory explained apologetically. Board policy on financial disclosures. I'm on the board, I reminded him. Of course. It's just procedural, you understand. I understood perfectly. They were stonewalling me while continuing whatever transfers and restructuring they'd initiated. Time to change tactics. My years of building and maintaining VisuTrack had given me intimate knowledge of our systems, including administrative access points unknown to Daniel, who had reconfigured most of the platform's architecture. Late one evening, after everyone had left the office, I used these backdoor entries to access the company's complete financial records and legal documentation. What I discovered stunned me. Over the past 18 months, ClearVision's most valuable assets had been systematically transferred to entities controlled by the Thompson family. The VisuTrack platform, my creation, my life's work, had been sold to Vertex Solutions for a fraction of its market value, with Daniel now listed as the primary developer and intellectual property owner. Client contracts had been reassigned to Thompson Digital Holdings. Most alarming of all, my ownership stake in ClearVision had been reduced from 85% to just 26% through a series of complex transactions buried in documents I had supposedly authorized. Several bore my electronic signature, though I had never knowingly signed them. Others had been executed through powers of attorney I had granted Michael for convenience during our second year of marriage. The full picture was breathtaking in its calculated betrayal. While I focused on product development and client relationships, my husband and brother-in-law had orchestrated the systematic theft of my company. The Chicago venture represented the final stage, a new business leveraging my technology and clients, but owned entirely by the Thompson family, with no role for me. I documented everything meticulously, downloading files and capturing screenshots that I secured in an encrypted cloud storage account. Then I consulted the best technology intellectual property attorney in Seattle, bringing the evidence of what appeared to be fraudulent transfers and signature forgeries. "This is extraordinary," the attorney said after reviewing my documentation. "If these signatures were obtained without your informed consent, we're looking at potential fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and possibly criminal charges. What's my best course of action? Preserve evidence, continue documenting everything, and prepare for litigation. But most importantly, secure whatever original intellectual property documentation you have. Early designs, development notes, anything proving you created VisuTrack before the Thompsons entered the picture." Fortunately, I had maintained comprehensive records from ClearVision's inception, notebooks filled with initial algorithms, dated digital files showing VisuTrack's evolution, even emails to early clients describing the technology in my own words, all safely stored in a personal cloud account and backup drives at my mother's old house in Portland, which I had kept as a rental property. Over the next 3 weeks, I built my case methodically while maintaining a facade of ignorance. I met with clients who could testify to my role as VisuTrack's creator. I documented every instance where Michael or Daniel had prevented me from accessing company information. The forensic accountant traced the complex web of asset transfers, identifying multiple instances where corporate governance procedures had been violated. The final piece fell into place when my attorney discovered that several key documents bearing my electronic signature had been executed while I was demonstrably elsewhere, presenting at a conference in San Diego, meeting clients in Portland. Clear evidence of forgery. With my evidence compiled and legal strategy prepared, all that remained was timing the confrontation. The opportunity presented itself when Michael scheduled a board meeting to approve the Chicago expansion, followed by a team lunch to announce the exciting new direction for ClearVision. The morning of the board meeting, I dressed with particular care. A charcoal Armani suit, subtle makeup, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Professional, polished, powerful. As I applied lipstick, Michael appeared in the bathroom doorway. "You look especially nice today," he observed. "Special client meeting?" "Just feeling good about the company's direction," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Big day with the Chicago announcement." He kissed my cheek. "I'm glad you're excited. I think you'll be impressed with what we've put together." "I'm sure I will," I murmured, resisting the urge to wipe his kiss away. The board meeting proceeded exactly as I anticipated. Michael presented the Chicago expansion as a strategic growth opportunity, positioning Thomson Analytics as a sister company that would license ClearVision's technology while targeting Midwest clients. Daniel outlined the technical integration, while Gregory detailed the financial structure. Throughout their presentations, no one acknowledged that this sister company excluded me entirely, that my technology was being deployed in a venture from which I would derive no benefit. They spoke as if this were a natural evolution, rather than the culmination of a calculated theft. When they finished, Michael turned to me. "Jessica, as founder and CEO, would you like to add anything before we vote on the proposal?" "Actually, yes." I opened my laptop and connected it to the conference room display. "I've prepared a presentation of my own." Michael frowned slightly. "This isn't on the agenda." "Consider it an addendum," I replied, pulling up the first slide, a comprehensive chart tracking asset transfers from ClearVision to Thomson-controlled entities over the previous 18 months. Before we discuss expansion, we should review some concerning patterns in our corporate governance. For the next 20 minutes, I methodically outlined what I had discovered: the fraudulent transfers, the forged signatures, the systematic dilution of my ownership. With each slide, the room grew more tense. Daniel stared at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. Gregory looked increasingly uncomfortable. Michael's expression hardened from confusion to anger to something approaching fear. "These are serious allegations," he finally interrupted. "If you had concerns, the appropriate channel would have been to discuss them privately, not ambush the board with unsubstantiated claims." Unsubstantiated? I pulled up documentation of signatures executed while I was provably elsewhere. "Would you like to explain how I signed these documents while giving a keynote address in San Diego? Or perhaps you can clarify why my intellectual property was sold to your brother's company without proper board approval or fair market valuation." Michael glanced at the other board members, his allies, his installations. "I think we should adjourn to discuss these matters privately." "Obviously, Jessica has misinterpreted." "The board meeting is not adjourned," I interrupted. "As CEO, I have one additional announcement." I displayed the final slide, a notice of emergency action filed with the state that morning. Effective immediately, I have removed Michael and Daniel Thomson from their positions at ClearVision Marketing, pending investigation into corporate malfeasance and potential criminal charges. Their access to company systems and facilities has been terminated. As if on cue, my phone pinged with a notification from the security team confirming that Michael and Daniel's credentials had been deactivated. I had timed the board meeting to coincide precisely with the execution of these measures, coordinated with our head of security, one of the few executives I had personally hired, and who remained loyal to me. "You can't do this," Michael sputtered. The board's composition and recent decisions are compromised by conflicts of interest and potential fraud," I replied calmly. "My emergency action, supported by the evidence presented, supersedes board authority until a full investigation is completed. Additionally, I've filed for injunctive relief preventing any further transfer of ClearVision assets or intellectual property." I stood, gathering my materials. "I suggest we continue this discussion with our respective legal counsel present. In the meantime, ClearVision staff are expecting an announcement about our future direction. Shall we join them for lunch as planned?" The team lunch that followed was surreal. Dozens of employees gathered at an upscale restaurant near the office, excited about the rumored expansion, unaware of the corporate drama unfolding among leadership. Michael, Daniel, Gregory, and I arrived together, a facade of unity masking the explosive confrontation that had just occurred. As servers distributed menus, Michael leaned close to whisper, "This is a mistake, Jessica. You're embarrassing yourself and destroying everything we've built." "Everything I built," I corrected quietly, "which you attempted to steal." He straightened, a practiced smile masking his fury as he greeted employees at nearby tables. I watched him working the room, the consummate executive, while I finalized the details of my next move on my phone beneath the table. When the entrees arrived, Michael stood to make the anticipated announcement. Despite everything, he maintained his composure, raising his glass as if nothing had happened. "Before we discuss exciting new developments for Clear Vision, I want to toast our incredible team. Your talent and dedication have brought us to this moment of expansion." That's when I made my move, sliding my corporate card to our office manager and excusing myself. Outside on the rainy sidewalk, I executed the final phase, activating the digital protocols I had prepared, officially freezing Michael and Daniel's access to every system, account, and property associated with Clear Vision. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. Michael and Daniel were escorted from the building by security that afternoon. Emergency board meetings were convened with outside counsel present. The Chicago expansion was suspended pending investigation. The evidence I had gathered proved irrefutable. Faced with potential criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement, Michael and Daniel agreed to a settlement, returning all Clear Vision assets and intellectual property in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The Thompson family, desperate to avoid public scandal, supported this resolution. Divorce proceedings followed, revealing further financial deceptions. Michael had been diverting our personal funds as well, preparing for a life that increasingly didn't include me. The prenuptial agreement he had insisted was just formality proved invaluable. It protected my business interests while establishing clear separation of assets. In the years since that confrontation, Clear Vision has thrived under restructured leadership. I've implemented robust governance protocols and diversified the board with experienced independent directors. Oracle, the AI project Michael and Daniel had attempted to suppress, launched successfully, and now represents our fastest-growing product line. I still sometimes wake at night, replaying moments from my marriage, searching for signs I should have recognized sooner. The casual dismissal of my contributions, the gradual exclusion from financial decisions, the subtle positioning of the Thompson family's interests above our partnership. But these moments of retrospection no longer dominate my thoughts. Instead, I focus on the future I'm building, one founded on authentic relationships and genuine collaboration rather than exploitation disguised as support. Last month, I received an Industry Leadership Award at a ceremony in Chicago. Ironically, the city where Michael had planned to establish his Thompson Analytics venture using my stolen technology. As I accepted the honor, I glimpsed Patricia Thompson among the attendees, accompanied by Robert. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, but not before I caught the flicker of something like respect in her expression. I didn't acknowledge them. Their approval no longer matters. What matters is the trail of evidence I followed, the strength I found in that moment of betrayal, and the company I reclaimed, more successful and more authentically mine than ever before. Sometimes the audit trail reveals more than just financial transactions. Sometimes it illuminates the truth about those we've trusted most, and about our own capacity to overcome their betrayal. The day I sold my first enterprise contract still stands as one of the proudest moments of my professional life. After 3 consecutive days of pitching VisuTrack to North Star Retail's marketing department, their CMO finally nodded and said, "Let's do this, Jessica." I remember walking out of their Seattle headquarters in a daze, the signed contract clutched to my chest like a precious artifact. Rain poured down, soaking my only professional blazer, but I didn't care. Standing on that busy downtown street, I called my best friend Mia and screamed so loudly into the phone that pedestrians stared. They signed! 6 figures, Mia! 6 figures! That night, I celebrated alone in my tiny apartment, sipping cheap champagne from a coffee mug while updating my business plan. Clear vision marketing was no longer just a dream scribbled in notebooks during my lunch breaks at other people's companies. It was real, with real clients, real revenue, and real potential. I'd spent 3 years building toward this moment. After graduating from Portland State with a marketing degree and crushing student loan debt, I'd worked at progressively more demanding positions at Seattle's digital agencies. Each role taught me something valuable: client management, budget, planning, team leadership, but none allowed me to fully implement my vision for data-driven marketing. The idea for VisuTrack came during a particularly frustrating client meeting where the CEO couldn't understand why his expensive advertising campaigns weren't delivering results. The data was there, but the visualization tools made it incomprehensible to anyone without technical expertise. I stayed up all night coding a prototype dashboard that translated complex metrics into intuitive visual patterns. When I presented it the next morning, the CEO's eyes lit up with understanding. "This is what I've been asking for all along," he said, turning to my boss. "Why couldn't your team produce something this clear before?" My boss took credit, of course, but that moment crystallized what would become Clear Vision's mission: making complex digital marketing data accessible and actionable for every level of an organization. I spent weekends and evenings developing the platform, teaching myself advanced coding skills through online courses and open-source communities. My apartment became a maze of whiteboards and sticky notes. My social life reduced to monthly drinks with Mia, where I would talk endlessly about database architectures and visualization algorithms while she patiently listened. "You should see someone occasionally who isn't a client or a computer," she suggested during one such evening. "When was your last date?" I waved the question away. "The platform needs at least 3 more core features before I can approach investors. Dating can wait." Mia sighed. "Just don't forget there's more to life than VisuTrack." But it was hard to remember that when every small victory, a new feature successfully implemented, a glowing testimonial from an early client, felt so intensely rewarding. The platform became not just my creation, but my identity. Clear Vision wasn't simply what I did, it was who I was. After securing the North Star contract, I took the leap and rented a small office space in a converted warehouse in South Lake Union. The industrial aesthetic, exposed brick, concrete floors, massive windows, cost less than traditional office space and conveyed the creative, innovative image I wanted for Clear Vision. I hired my first 3 employees: a developer to help expand VisuTrack's capabilities, a client success manager to maintain relationships, and an operations coordinator to handle everything else. We worked relentlessly, often sleeping on the office couch during product launches or major client implementations. Our intensity paid off. North Star renewed their contract after seeing a 28% increase in their marketing ROI, and they referred us to 2 other retailers in their network. Word began to spread through Seattle's business community about the small agency with the revolutionary analytics platform. By the time I met Michael Thompson, Clear Vision had 15 employees, a portfolio of impressive clients, and was on track to triple our previous year's revenue. The company was my whole world. I lived and breathed its challenges and triumphs, measuring my own worth by its success. Perhaps that made me particularly vulnerable to someone who seemed to value both the business I'd built and the woman behind it. The tech conference where we met had been a strategic investment in Clear Vision's growth. I'd spent months pursuing a speaking slot, knowing that visibility at this particular event could attract the enterprise-level clients we needed to scale. When the organizing committee finally approved my session on humanizing data, making analytics accessible to non-technical decision-makers, I spent weeks perfecting my presentation. The room was nearly full when I stepped onto the stage. a promising sign that my topic had resonated with attendees. For 30 minutes, I demonstrated how VisuTrack transformed impenetrable data into intuitive visual stories that empowered better marketing decisions. The audience was engaged, asking thoughtful questions that indicated genuine interest rather than polite attention. Afterward, as I gathered my materials, a tall man in an impeccably tailored navy suit approached the podium. With dark hair threaded, with subtle gray at the temples and confident posture, he stood out from the casual tech crowd. "That was genuinely illuminating," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Michael Thompson, VP of Strategy at Pinnacle Investments." His handshake was firm, his smile reaching his eyes in a way that seemed authentic rather than practiced. While most post-presentation conversations at these events followed predictable patterns of networking small talk, Michael asked perceptive questions about VisuTrack's underlying algorithms and my philosophy on data visualization. "What impressed me most was how you've solved for cognitive processing limitations," he said as we continued our conversation in the conference center lobby. "Most analytics platforms overwhelm users with data points without considering how human brains actually interpret visual information." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his insight. "Most investment VPs don't talk about cognitive processing limitations." He laughed. "I studied behavioral economics before focusing on investment strategy. The intersection of human psychology and data has always fascinated me." He glanced at his watch. "I have a panel in 10 minutes, but I'd love to continue this conversation. Would you be open to dinner later this week? Purely professional, of course. Pinnacle works with growing tech companies, and your approach to analytics is something our portfolio businesses could benefit from understanding." I hesitated briefly. Clear vision could certainly use strategic investment connections, but I'd learned to be cautious about purely professional dinners with men. Something about Michael's demeanor, the respectful distance he maintained, the way he focused on my technical expertise rather than surface observations, felt different from the usual venture capital approaches I'd encountered. "That would be fine," I replied, accepting his business card. "I'll have my assistant reach out to schedule." Michael's card wasn't the standard startup minimalist design, but a heavyweight cream stock with embossed navy text. Traditional, substantial, conveying established success rather than aspiring potential. I tucked it into my conference folder, not realizing how significantly this small exchange would alter the trajectory of my life. 2 days later, we met at Altura, an upscale Italian restaurant known for its tasting menu and extensive wine list. Michael had reserved a quiet corner table that allowed for conversation without shouting, a thoughtful touch that I appreciated after too many business dinners in trendy, ear-splittingly loud venues. He arrived precisely on time, greeting me with a warm handshake before the maitre d' guided us to our table. As we settled in, I noticed how the waitstaff addressed him by name, clearly a regular patron. He ordered wine after a brief consultation with the sommelier, selecting an Oregon Pinot Noir that he thought would showcase the region's terroir. "You're familiar with Oregon wines?" I asked, surprised by the choice. "My father collects wines from emerging regions. The Willamette Valley has been producing world-class Pinots for years now, though they're still underappreciated." He smiled. "Where in Oregon are you from? I detected a slight accent during your presentation." "Portland," I admitted, though I thought I'd lost any trace of an accent after 8 years in Seattle. "It's very subtle, just a certain cadence to some words. I have a good ear for regional speech patterns." Our conversation flowed easily from professional backgrounds to educational experiences to perspectives on Seattle's tech ecosystem. Michael described growing up in Chicago as the elder son of Robert Thompson, who had transformed a modest manufacturing business into a diversified holding company. "My father expected both my brother and me to join Thompson Enterprises immediately after college," he explained. "Daniel, my younger brother, rebelled completely, studied computer science instead of business, and launched a startup right after graduation. I took a more diplomatic approach, agreeing to get my MBA but insisting on building my career independently before considering the family business. And how did that go over? I asked, genuinely curious about the family dynamics. About as well as you'd expect. Michael laughed ruefully. My father is old school, believes family should work together, support the legacy. But he also respects determination. When I secured the position at Pinnacle and moved to Seattle, he eventually accepted it as valuable experience I'd bring. Back to Chicago someday. Will you? Go back someday. Michael twirled his wine glass thoughtfully. That's the multi-million-dollar question. I love what I do at Pinnacle. Identifying promising technologies, helping founders realize their vision. The family business is more traditional, less innovative. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. But enough about me. Tell me how Clear Vision went from concept to reality. The conference bio mentioned you founded it 3 years ago. For the next hour, I shared Clear Vision's journey. The late nights coding the prototype, maxing out credit cards to hire my first developer, cold calling potential clients until someone finally agreed to a meeting. Michael listened attentively, asking insightful questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than performative networking. What's your ultimate vision? He asked as we finished our entrees. Where do you see Clear Vision in 5 years? The question was standard interview fare, but something about Michael's direct gaze made me abandon my usual polished response about market share and expansion targets. I want to fundamentally change how companies understand their digital marketing impact, I said instead. Most businesses are drowning in data without extracting meaningful insights. The platforms that promise to help actually create more confusion with their complexity. I believe analytics should illuminate, not intimidate. Michael nodded slowly. That's what struck me about your presentation. You're not just building a better analytics mousetrap, you're reimagining the relationship between data and decision makers. He paused. The question is whether you're thinking big enough about how to scale that vision. Meaning? Clear. Vision has innovative technology and a compelling mission. But the Seattle market, even the entire West Coast, is just the beginning. To truly transform how companies understand their marketing impact, you need strategic growth capital, enterprise, sales channels, and a scalable implementation model. I raised an eyebrow. Is this the investment pitch portion of the evening? He laughed. Not exactly. Pinnacle typically invests in later-stage companies than Clear Vision, but I do have connections that might benefit your growth strategy. He pulled out a small notebook and jotted down several names. These are people worth talking to, a venture partner who specializes in MarTech, a sales director who helped a similar-sized company build their enterprise channel, and a CFO who could advise on financial structures for your next growth phase. He tore out the page and handed it to me. No obligations, no expectations, just some resources that might be useful. The gesture was generous without being presumptuous. Throughout the evening, Michael had maintained a perfect balance, showing interest without pushing boundaries, offering help without implying I needed rescuing. As the waiter cleared our dessert plates, I realized 3 hours had passed in what felt like minutes. I've monopolized your entire evening, Michael said, signaling for the check. It was a pleasant monopoly, I replied, reaching for my wallet. He waved away my attempt to contribute. Please, this was my invitation. Consider it an investment in Seattle's tech ecosystem. Outside the restaurant, waiting for our respective Ubers, Michael turned to me. I enjoyed our conversation, Jessica. Would it be out of line to suggest doing this again sometime? Still professional, but perhaps slightly less formal? The invitation hung in the air between us, clearly offering a potential shift from networking to something more personal, while respectfully leaving the choice entirely to me. In the glow of the restaurant's exterior lights, I studied his face. The genuine smile, the attentive eyes, the absence of the entitled expectation I'd encountered from too many successful men in the tech world. I think I'd like that, I replied. Our second dinner, at a smaller neighborhood restaurant in Madison Park, felt noticeably different. Michael wore jeans and a cashmere sweater instead of a business suit. I left my standard black blazer at home in favor of a blue dress I rarely had occasion to wear. The conversation ventured beyond business into books we'd read, places we'd traveled, films that had influenced our thinking. I learned he played classical piano, preferred mountains to beaches, and had a weakness for old bookstores. By our third dinner, we'd dropped any pretense that these were professional meetings. When he kissed me goodnight outside my building, it felt like the natural progression of a connection that had been building since that first conversation at the tech conference. Dating Michael expanded my world beyond clear vision in ways I hadn't anticipated. He introduced me to Seattle's symphony, took me hiking on remote Olympic Peninsula trails, and spent hours browsing Powell's books with me during a weekend trip to Portland. After months of all-consuming focus on my company, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been neglected. My love of classical music, my enjoyment of outdoor adventures, my appreciation for quiet evenings with stimulating conversation. Michael approached our relationship with the same thoughtful intentionality he brought to business discussions. He remembered details from our conversations, planned experiences he knew I'd enjoy, and respected the demanding schedule that came with running a growing company. When urgent client issues required me to cancel plans, he responded with understanding rather than resentment. "Building something meaningful requires sacrifice," he said after I apologetically rescheduled a dinner for the third time. "I admire your commitment to clear vision." 4 months into our relationship, Michael invited me to his Madison Park home for the first time, a modern lakefront property with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington. The interior was tastefully furnished with mid-century pieces, original artwork, and an impressive grand piano in the living room. "This is beautiful," I said, taking in the panoramic water view. "It's a good investment property," he replied, modestly. "But it's never felt quite like home until now." He wrapped his arms around me from behind as we stood at the window. "Seeing it through your eyes makes me appreciate it differently." That night, as we lay tangled in his sheets watching moonlight on the lake, I experienced an unfamiliar sense of contentment, as if the separate pieces of my life were aligning into a coherent whole. Clear Vision was thriving, now with 22 employees and a client waiting list. My relationship with Michael offered intellectual stimulation, emotional support, and genuine partnership. For the first time since founding my company, I allowed myself to imagine a future that balanced professional ambition with personal fulfillment. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked, brushing hair from my face. "Balance," I replied. For years, Clear Vision has been everything. My identity, my purpose, my entire focus. I never expected to find someone who understands that commitment but still makes me want to create space for something beyond work. He was quiet for a moment, tracing patterns on my shoulder. Building a company requires singular focus, especially in the early stages. But the most successful founders eventually develop teams and structures that allow them to maintain vision without sacrificing everything else. He kissed my forehead. "You deserve both, Jessica. The success you're creating and a life rich, with experiences beyond the office." His perspective seemed so healthy, so aligned with what I was beginning to want for myself. How could I have known that his words weren't offering balance, but laying groundwork for control? That his seeming respect for my company masked intention to possess it? That in Michael Thompson's worldview, deserving both meant he would systematically take one while presenting himself as the champion of the other? 6 months into our relationship, Michael invited me to meet his parents during their visit to Seattle. The dinner reservation at Canlis, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, signaled the significance of the introduction. Though I'd built a successful company and navigated complex client relationships with confidence, I found myself uncharacteristically nervous about making a good impression on Robert and Patricia Thompson. I chose my outfit carefully. A tailored black dress that projected professionalism while remaining appropriately elegant for the venue. Michael picked me up in his Audi, squeezing my hand reassuringly as we drove. "They're going to love you," he said. "My mother's already impressed by your entrepreneurial success. You've told them about clear vision." "Of course. They're interested in everything important to me." He glanced over with a warm smile. "And you, Jessica Davis, have become very important to me." The restaurant host greeted Michael by name, immediately escorting us to a corner table with stunning views of Lake Union and the Seattle skyline. Robert and Patricia Thompson were already seated, cocktails in hand. Robert rose as we approached, a tall, imposing man with Michael's same strong jawline and confident posture. Patricia remained seated, her critical assessment barely disguised as she looked me over. "Michael, darling," she said, offering her cheek for his kiss before turning to me with a practiced smile. "And you must be Jessica. We've heard so much about you." Her handshake was brief, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she withdrew her hand. Everything about Patricia Thompson conveyed cultivated affluence. Her perfectly styled silver bob, her understated Chanel suit, her measured expressions. Robert's greeting was more genuinely warm, his handshake firm as he welcomed me. "The woman who's captured both my son's attention and the Seattle tech scene," he said, gesturing for us to sit. "Michael tells us your analytics platform is revolutionary." "That's generous," I replied, settling into the chair Michael held for me. "VisuTrack is innovative, but we're still evolving its capabilities." "Underselling yourself already," Michael commented with a fond smile. "Jessica's platform has increased marketing ROI for clients by an average of 42%. Her client retention rate is nearly perfect because once companies implement VisuTrack, they can't imagine operating without it." Dinner proceeded with polite conversation about Seattle's growth, the Thompson family's recent travels, and general business trends. Patricia asked carefully curated questions about my background, each one subtly probing for weaknesses or inadequacies. "Portland State is regional, isn't it?" she commented when education came up. "Did you consider more established institutions?" "My scholarship options were limited," I replied evenly. "But PSU's marketing program has strong industry connections, which helped me secure valuable internships." "Practical experience over prestige," Robert nodded approvingly. "I respect that approach." Patricia's smile tightened. "And your family? Are they in business as well?" "My mother was a high school English teacher," I explained. "She raised me alone after my father left when I was 4. "How challenging for you both," Patricia murmured with practiced sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. "No siblings? Extended? Family in business?" "No siblings. My mother had a brother in California, but we weren't close." Each answer seemed to confirm some private assessment Patricia was making. Michael squeezed my knee under the table reassuringly, jumping in to redirect the conversation toward Clear Vision's growth metrics and future plans. When the entrees arrived, Robert leaned forward with increased interest. "Michael mentions you've been bootstrapping until now. Have you considered bringing on strategic partners? Someone with established business experience?" "Dad," Michael interjected, "Jessica's company is growing faster than most of Pinnacle's portfolio companies. Her methodical approach is working." "Yes, but scaling requires different skills than launching," Robert insisted. "No offense, Jessica, but I've seen many promising ventures fail during expansion because the founder couldn't evolve." The comment stung, but I maintained my composure. "You're right that scaling presents different challenges. That's why I've been building out our executive team with complementary expertise. But maintaining our core values and vision requires founder involvement through growth phases." Robert appeared to consider this, nodding slowly. "Smart approach. Though sometimes founders become the bottleneck rather than the visionary. Learning when to delegate is critical." The conversation shifted to safer topics: Seattle restaurants, upcoming symphony performances, the renovation project at the Thompson's Chicago home. Throughout dinner, I felt Patricia's continued evaluation, her questions designed to establish where exactly I belonged in the social hierarchy she maintained. By dessert, it was clear that her verdict placed me several rungs below acceptable for her son. As we waited for the valet afterward, Michael pulled me aside. "You were fantastic. Dad was impressed by your business acumen." "And your mother?" He hesitated. "Mom takes time to warm up to people. She's protective of our family legacy." He squeezed my hand. "Don't worry about her. It's my opinion that matters, and I think you're extraordinary." His reassurance temporarily soothed my unease, but the dinner had revealed something important about the Thompson family dynamics: a hierarchical structure with Patricia as the unspoken authority on social acceptability and Robert as the arbiter of business legitimacy. Michael's role as the elder son carried expectations about the kinds of relationships and connections deemed appropriate. What I failed to understand then was how deeply Michael had internalized these values despite his outward rejection of them. His move to Seattle, his career at Pinnacle rather than Thompson Enterprises, his apparent respect for my self-made success, all suggested independence from his family's expectations. In reality, he had simply developed more sophisticated methods of fulfilling them. 2 months after the dinner with his parents, Michael planned a weekend getaway to the San Juan Islands. We stayed at a luxury resort overlooking the water, hiking during the day and enjoying elaborate meals in the evening. On our final night, as we walked along a moonlit beach, he suddenly stopped and turned to face me. "These past 8 months have been the happiest of my life," he said, taking both my hands in his. "You've shown me what true partnership can be. Supporting each other's ambitions, sharing both challenges and triumphs, building something meaningful together." As he dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket, I felt a complex rush of emotions: joy, surprise, and an unexpected flicker of apprehension that I immediately dismissed. "Jessica Davis, will you marry me?" The ring was, spectacular. A 3-carat oval diamond in a platinum setting that caught the moonlight with dazzling brilliance. More overwhelming than the ring was the sensation of being chosen by this man who could have had anyone, who had seen me at my most driven and ambitious and still wanted a future together. "Yes," I whispered, tears blurring my vision as he slipped the ring onto my finger. "Yes, I will." He stood, gathering me into a tight embrace. "We're going to create an amazing life together," he promised. "Everything you've built with Clear Vision is just the beginning. I want to help you take it to heights you've never imagined." As we celebrated with champagne on the balcony of our suite, watching the moon's reflection ripple across the water, I felt a profound sense of having arrived, not just professionally with Clear Vision's success, but personally in finding someone who valued my ambition rather than feeling threatened by it. "When should we tell your parents?" I asked, admiring how the diamond caught the light. "I already asked for my father's blessing," Michael admitted, with a sheepish smile. "Old-fashioned." "I know, but it mattered to him." "And what did he say?" "He said I'd chosen a woman with vision and determination, qualities the Thompson family respects." Michael kissed my forehead. "Mom will come around once she gets to know you better." I chose to believe him, to trust that Patricia Thompson would eventually see beyond my lack of pedigree to the person who made her son happy. This was the first of many choices I made based on what I wanted to believe rather than the evidence before me. Choices that would eventually lead to the dismantling of everything I'd built. The weeks following our engagement passed in a blur of congratulations, celebrations, and wedding planning discussions. Michael suggested combining our finances to simplify things as we build a life together, presenting it as a natural step for committed partners. I agreed without hesitation, transferring my personal savings into joint accounts and adding his name to my existing credit cards. Marriage is a partnership, he explained as we signed paperwork at the bank. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. I nodded, not recognizing this sentiment for what it truly was. Not a romantic declaration, but a statement of intent. The first step in a calculated acquisition strategy that would eventually extend from my personal assets to Clear Vision itself. Wedding planning consumed the next 6 months, though not in the way I had anticipated. What I had envisioned as an intimate celebration at a small Seattle venue quickly transformed under Patricia Thompson's influence into an elaborate society event at Suncadia Resort in the Cascade Mountains. Guest lists, floral arrangements, menu selections, all became battlegrounds where my preferences were systematically overruled in favor of Thompson traditions. The napkins need to be seafoam, not teal, Patricia instructed the wedding planner during one particularly exhausting meeting. We've always used seafoam at significant family events. When I attempted to redirect toward the color palette I had originally chosen, Patricia smiled tightly. Jessica, dear, there are certain expectations when you marry into an established family. The Thompson name carries weight in Chicago social circles, and many of our guests are traveling across the country for this celebration. Michael, when I expressed frustration privately, kissed my forehead and suggested compromise. Mom's enthusiastic because she's finally accepting you as family. Let her handle the details she cares about, and focus your energy on what matters most to you. What mattered most to me, beyond marrying Michael, was maintaining Clear Vision's growth trajectory while planning the wedding. The company had expanded to 38 employees, with a new office occupying an entire floor of a downtown building. Major clients were signing multi-year contracts, and we had begun receiving acquisition inquiries from larger marketing technology firms. Between wedding planning sessions and client meetings, I rarely had time to question why Patricia's vision for the celebration seemed designed to highlight my outsider status rather than welcome me into the family. The disparity became painfully obvious during the ceremony itself, when my side of the church held barely 20 guests while the Thompson pews overflowed with Chicago society, business associates, and extended family. During the reception, I overheard a conversation between two women I recognized as Patricia's friends from the Chicago Arts Council. Michael always had a thing for fixer-uppers, one commented, sipping champagne as she watched me greet guests. Remember that Gibson girl? The artist? At least this one has business sense, her companion replied. And Patricia can work with that. A few years of proper guidance, the right introductions, she'll polish up adequately. I should have recognized these comments as warning signs, indications that the Thompsons viewed me as an acquisition to be reshaped rather than a person to be respected. Instead, I focused on Michael's proud introduction as he guided me through clusters of guests. My brilliant wife, the CEO of Clear Vision Marketing. After a honeymoon in the Maldives, we settled into married life in Michael's Madison Park home. The transition felt surprisingly seamless. Michael had already cleared closet space for my clothes and converted a spare bedroom into a home office for those evenings when I needed to work late. He suggested combining our financial resources to simplify household management. Marriage is a partnership, he said as we sat with our respective laptops, transferring accounts into joint names. Why maintain separate accounts when we're building a life together? The logic seemed sound. I added Michael as an authorized user on my credit cards, provided account access to my investment portfolio, and merged my savings into our joint accounts. These decisions, made in the spirit of marital unity, would later prove devastating, but at the time, they felt like natural expressions of trust and commitment. Clear Vision continued to thrive during our first year of marriage. We expanded internationally, opening a small satellite office in London to serve European clients. VissuTrack's capabilities evolved to include artificial intelligence components that could predict consumer behavior patterns based on historical data. Industry publications featured our innovative approach, and I was invited to keynote several. major marketing technology conferences. Around our first anniversary, Michael began expressing concern about my workload. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he observed one evening as I reviewed reports at the dining table. "Clear Vision's growth is requiring more of your time than is sustainable." I looked up, bleary-eyed from hours of spreadsheet analysis. "It's temporary. Once we complete the enterprise platform upgrade, things will stabilize." Michael sat beside me, gently closing my laptop. What if there was a better way to structure the company? A strategic team to manage growth while you focus on vision and innovation? His suggestion seemed born of genuine concern rather than ulterior motives. When he proposed bringing Daniel on as Chief Technology Officer, the recommendation made practical sense. Daniel had indeed been helpful with VisuTrack development, often spending weekends at our home discussing potential enhancements and troubleshooting technical issues. "Daniel's unhappy at Amazon. Too much red tape, not enough creative freedom," Michael explained. "He's brilliant with technology, and he already understands VisuTrack's architecture. As CTO, he could lead the development team while you focus on strategic direction and client relationships." The proposition was tempting. Managing both the technical and business aspects of a rapidly growing company had become increasingly challenging. Having a trusted family member oversee the platform's development would allow me to concentrate on vision and growth strategy, and, Michael continued, I could step in as COO. Pinnacle would allow me to work part-time while I help streamline ClearVision's operations. My experience with scaling companies would complement your innovation and market insights. I considered the suggestion carefully. Wouldn't that create complications? Being married to my COO, having my brother-in-law as CTO? Family businesses have operated successfully for generations, Michael replied. The Thompsons have managed multiple ventures together for decades. The key is clear role definition and mutual respect. The decision to bring Michael and Daniel into ClearVision's leadership seemed logical at the time, a strategic expansion of our executive team with trusted individuals who had relevant expertise. What I couldn't see was how this restructuring would fundamentally alter company dynamics and gradually disenfranchise me from my own creation. The shifts began subtly. Michael instituted formal board meetings in place of our collaborative team, planning sessions. He hired executives from his previous business connections, a CFO with investment banking experience, a director of business development who had worked at Pinnacle, a marketing director from his father's network. Each new hire was presented as an enhancement to our leadership team, bringing sophisticated expertise to support our growth objectives. In reality, each addition diluted my influence and inserted individuals whose primary loyalty lay with Michael, rather than with me or the company's original vision. The culture began shifting from the collaborative, innovative environment I had cultivated to something more hierarchical and traditional. What Michael called professional maturity, but what felt increasingly like corporate rigidity. Daniel immersed himself in VisuTrack's development, often working late into the night with the engineering team. His technical contributions were genuinely valuable. He implemented enterprise-scale architecture that improved platform performance and added sophisticated features that our largest clients had requested. If he sometimes made decisions without consulting me, I attributed it to enthusiasm rather than intentional exclusion. The first significant warning sign appeared during a quarterly business review with our largest client, Northwest Financial. I had prepared a presentation on upcoming platform enhancements, expecting to lead the meeting as I always had with this particular client relationship. As we settled around the conference table, however, Michael smoothly took control. Before Jessica walks you through the technical roadmap, I want to provide context on our strategic direction, he began, launching into a polished overview of ClearVision's growth objectives. For the next 30 minutes, he and Daniel presented our company vision, with occasional deferral to me for creative perspective. The client executives directed their technical questions to Daniel and their business inquiries to Michael, while I was reduced to a supporting role in a meeting I had traditionally led. Afterward, I expressed my concerns to Michael. That was awkward. You essentially presented me as a secondary player to a client who's worked directly with me for years. Michael looked surprised. I thought we were an effective team. The client was clearly impressed with our professional structure. They've been hesitant about expanding their contract because they worried ClearVision was too dependent on you personally. Showing our depth of leadership makes them more confident about our stability. His explanation was plausible. Many clients did express concern about founder-centric companies, worrying about continuity if the key individual became unavailable. Presenting ClearVision as having robust leadership beyond me could indeed strengthen client confidence in our longevity. Still, something felt off about the interaction. A subtle repositioning that continued in subsequent client meetings, industry events, and internal communications. Increasingly, I found myself introduced as the founder and creative visionary, while Michael was positioned as the operational leader who translated my ideas into scalable business practices. The pattern repeated at a technology conference where Michael, Daniel, and I were scheduled to represent ClearVision on a panel about marketing analytics. During the discussion, questions about technical specifications were directed to Daniel, business strategy inquiries to Michael, and I was primarily asked about the company's founding story and creative approach. Your husband and brother-in-law make quite the leadership team, a potential client commented during the post-panel reception. It must be nice having them handle the complex operational aspects while you focus on the big-picture vision. I smiled, tightly, resisting the urge to clarify that I had built the company and developed the core technology long before either Thompson brother became involved. The perception shift was happening in real time, from founder and CEO to creative visionary, with supporting male relatives who handled the serious business components. When I raised these concerns with Michael that evening in our hotel room, he seemed genuinely perplexed. People are finally seeing ClearVision as a substantial enterprise rather than a founder-centric startup. Isn't that what we've been working toward? Building a company that's bigger than any individual? Yes, but there's a difference between building a sustainable organization and erasing my central role in its creation and leadership, I replied. Michael sat beside me on the bed, taking my hands in his. Jessica, no one could ever erase what you've built. Without you, ClearVision wouldn't exist. But for it to reach its full potential, clients and partners need to see a comprehensive leadership team, not just a brilliant founder. We're complementing your vision, not replacing it. His words were reassuring, his tone sincere. Once again, I allowed myself to be persuaded that my discomfort stemmed from founder attachment issues rather than legitimate concerns about being systematically sidelined in my own company. The erosion of my authority continued through subtle governance changes. During my annual review of our operating agreement, a task that had become perfunctory as the company expanded, I noticed modifications to decision-making protocols and approval requirements. When questioned, our new corporate counsel, hired on Michael's recommendation to replace my original attorney, explained these as standard updates to reflect the company's more sophisticated structure. Board composition shifted as well. Initially consisting of me, Michael, and one independent director, the board expanded to include Daniel and two executives from Michael's professional network. Decisions that I had previously made unilaterally now required majority board approval, and I frequently found myself outvoted on matters ranging from expansion priorities to hiring decisions. This is normal corporate governance, Michael explained when I expressed frustration about being unable to implement a marketing initiative I felt strongly about. As companies mature, decision-making becomes more distributed and consensus-driven. What he didn't acknowledge was that the consensus consistently aligned with his vision rather than mine. A more conservative growth strategy, prioritizing optimization of existing services over the innovative new features I wanted to develop. establishing relationships with traditional enterprise clients rather than the disruptive startups I preferred working with. The most troubling development came during our third year of marriage, when I began developing Oracle, an AI-enhanced version of VisuTrack that could not only analyze past marketing performance, but predict future consumer behavior patterns and automatically adjust digital campaigns in real time. The project represented months of research and conceptual development, combining my original vision for VisuTrack with emerging machine learning capabilities. When I presented the concept to our executive team, expecting enthusiasm for this revolutionary advancement, the response was notably subdued. Daniel raised technical concerns about compatibility with our existing architecture. Gregory Phillips, the CFO Michael had hired, questioned the development costs and ROI timeline. Michael himself suggested a more thorough business case before proceeding. "We need to focus on optimizing our current offerings before pursuing new ventures," he said, effectively tabling the discussion. "The board will need convincing that this is the right direction." I left the meeting frustrated, but determined to develop a more detailed proposal. That evening, I stayed late at the office, compiling market research and technical specifications that would address the concerns raised. As I headed to the kitchen for coffee around 9 o'clock, I noticed light from the main conference room. Unusual for that hour when most employees had long departed. Through the glass wall, I could see Michael, Daniel, and Gregory, huddled over laptops, engaged in intense conversation. Curious about what had them working so late, I moved closer, staying out of sight but within earshot of their partially opened door. "The Seattle assets should be structured under Thomson Digital Holdings," Michael was saying. "That gives us control over the physical infrastructure while the intellectual property transfers to Vertex Solutions." "What about the new AI project she's proposing?" Gregory asked. "If she develops it under Clear Vision, it complicates things." Daniel shook his head. "We can't let her build it here. The licensing structure I've implemented means any derivatives of the core technology would fall under the existing agreements. We need her to shelve it for now." Michael nodded in agreement. "I'll handle Jessica. She trusts me to manage the business side. As long as she can keep playing with her code and being the face of the company, she doesn't look too deeply at the legal structure." "And if she starts asking questions?" Gregory pressed. "She won't," Michael replied with absolute confidence. "Jessica's brilliant with technology but naive about business maneuvering. By the time the Chicago expansion is announced, everything will be positioned correctly." Chicago expansion? This was the first I'd heard of any plans to open offices in Chicago. My hands trembled as I backed silently away from the door, returning to my office to gather my belongings. Whatever they were planning, they clearly intended to exclude me from significant business decisions despite my position as CEO and founder. The drive home passed in a blur, fragments of the overheard conversation replaying in my mind. References to Thomson Digital Holdings and Vertex Solutions, entities I had never heard of, but which appeared to be acquiring Clear Vision's assets. The dismissive way Michael had spoken about me, brilliant but naive, easily managed as long as I could play with my code. The confidence with which he stated I wouldn't ask questions. At home, I went through the motions of normal evening. Routines, greeting Michael warmly when he returned around 11 o'clock. He mentioned working late with Daniel on quarterly projections, a plausible excuse I now recognized as a lie. As he showered, I lay awake, piecing together patterns that suddenly made terrible sense. The gradual changes in governance, the strategic hires loyal to Michael, the subtle repositioning of my role from leader to figurehead. Rather than confronting him immediately, I decided to investigate further. A direct accusation without comprehensive evidence would likely result in plausible denials and increased caution on their part. If Michael, Daniel, and Gregory were indeed restructuring the company without my knowledge, I needed to understand exactly what they had done before taking action. My investigation began methodically the next morning. I arrived at the office early, acting as if nothing had changed. During the executive meeting, I smiled and nodded as Michael outlined Q3 projections, participated normally in discussions about client retention strategies, and even had lunch with Daniel to discuss potential enhancements to our existing platform. All while mentally cataloging inconsistencies and noting which executives seemed privy to information I hadn't been provided. That night, I waited until Michael was deeply asleep before slipping out of bed and into his home office. His laptop required a password, but after 3 attempts, I guessed correctly. The name of his first dog combined with his birth year, a combination he had mentioned once during a conversation about password security, ironically enough. The files I discovered confirmed my worst fears. Emails between Michael, Daniel, and Gregory detailed a comprehensive restructuring plan that would effectively transfer ClearVision's valuable assets, including the VisuTrack technology, to new entities controlled by the Thompsons. Vertex Solutions, incorporated in Delaware, with Daniel listed as the primary inventor and intellectual property owner, had already been assigned key patents that I had developed before either brother joined the company. Thompson Digital Holdings, another entity controlled by Michael and his father, had recently acquired the office lease, equipment, and client contracts formerly held directly by ClearVision. A separate email thread discussed plans for a Chicago expansion, not an extension of ClearVision, but a new venture called Thompson Analytics that would leverage VisuTrack's technology under license from Vertex Solutions. Most damning of all was a legal memorandum from a law firm I didn't recognize, outlining how my ownership stake could be diluted through a series of seemingly legitimate business transactions. The memo referenced agreements I supposedly had signed, though I had no recollection of many of them. I forwarded the critical emails to my personal account, took screenshots of the legal documents, and carefully returned everything to its original state before returning to bed. Lying beside my husband, the man who was systematically stealing my company, I stared at the ceiling, calculating my next move. Rather than confronting Michael immediately, I decided to gather more comprehensive evidence. The next day, I scheduled coffee with Stephanie Romano, our original corporate counsel who had been replaced by Michael's preferred legal team. Under the guise of seeking advice about intellectual property protection for Oracle, I casually inquired about ClearVision's current corporate structure. "That's not really my department anymore," she said hesitantly. "After the reorganization last year, all the corporate governance work was moved to Bradshaw and Wells." "Of course," I nodded, as if I recalled this perfectly. "Michael handles so much of the administrative side now, sometimes I lose track of the details." Stephanie hesitated, stirring her coffee. "Jessica, as your friend rather than your attorney, have you reviewed the operating agreements you signed during the restructuring? The terms were unusual for a founder in your position." "Unusual? How?" She lowered her voice. "I probably shouldn't say this, but I was surprised by how much control you ceded to the board. It's not how I would have advised you to proceed." This confirmation from a trusted professional amplified my concerns. When I returned to the office, I formally requested complete financial records and corporate governance documents from Gregory, citing my need to review our structure before finalizing the Oracle proposal. His response was telling. Immediate discomfort followed by vague references to board protocols, requiring such requests to go through proper channels. When I persisted, reminding him that as CEO I had the right to review all company documentation, he reluctantly provided heavily redacted reports that revealed little. "Michael suggested I direct specific questions to him," Gregory explained apologetically. "Board policy on financial disclosures." "I'm on the board," I reminded him. "Of course. It's just procedural, you understand?" I understood perfectly. They were stonewalling me while continuing whatever transfers and restructuring they had initiated. Time to change tactics. My years of building VisuTrack had given me intimate knowledge of our systems, including administrative access points that even Daniel didn't know about. Late one evening, after everyone had left the office, I used these backdoor entries to access the company's complete financial records and legal documentation. What I discovered stunned me in its comprehensive betrayal. Over the past 18 months, ClearVision's most valuable assets had been systematically transferred to entities controlled by the Thompson family. VisuTrack, my creation, my life's work, had been sold to Vertex Solutions for a fraction of its market value, with Daniel now listed as the primary developer and intellectual property owner. Client contracts had been reassigned to Thompson Digital Holdings through a series of transactions disguised as corporate reorganization for tax efficiency. Most alarming of all, my ownership stake had been reduced from 85% to just 26% through a series of complex transactions buried in documents I had supposedly authorized. Several bore my electronic signature, though I had never knowingly signed them. Others had been executed through powers of attorney I had granted Michael during our second year of marriage, authorities I had provided for household management during an extended international business trip, never imagining they would be used to fundamentally alter my company's ownership structure. The full picture was breathtaking in its calculated betrayal. While I focused on product development and client relationships, my husband and brother-in-law had orchestrated the systematic theft of my company. The Chicago venture represented the final stage, a new business leveraging my technology and clients, but owned entirely by the Thompson family. I worked through the night, methodically downloading files and capturing screenshots that I secured in an encrypted cloud storage account. Then I compiled a timeline of transactions, noting which documents appeared to contain forged signatures or were executed through potentially misused powers of attorney. By morning, I had accumulated substantial evidence of what appeared to be corporate malfeasance. The next step was obtaining professional guidance on how to proceed. I contacted Amanda Wilson, widely regarded as Seattle's premier intellectual property attorney, requesting an urgent consultation under strict confidentiality. In her downtown office later that day, I presented the evidence I had gathered. Amanda reviewed the documents methodically, her expression growing increasingly grave. "This is extraordinary," she said finally. "If these signatures were obtained without your informed consent, or if powers of attorney were misused for purposes beyond their intended scope, we're looking at potential fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and possibly criminal charges." "What's my best course of action?" I asked, feeling simultaneously devastated by the betrayal and energized by the prospect of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. "First, preserve all evidence and continue documenting everything without alerting Michael or Daniel to your awareness," she advised. "Second, we need to secure any original intellectual property documentation you have, early designs, development, notes, anything proving you created VisuTrack before the Thompsons entered the picture." Fortunately, I had maintained comprehensive records from ClearVision's inception. Notebooks filled with initial algorithms, dated digital files showing VisuTrack's evolution, even emails to early clients describing the technology in my own words. All safely stored in a personal cloud account and backup drives at my mother's old house in Portland, which I had kept as a rental property after her death. Next, we'll need to identify instances where corporate governance protocols were violated during these transfers, Amanda continued. Many of these transactions appear to lack proper board approval or shareholder notification, and we'll want forensic accounting to trace the financial implications. Over the next 3 weeks, I built my case methodically while maintaining a facade of ignorance. I met with early clients who could testify to my role as VisuTrack's creator. I documented every instance where Michael or Daniel had prevented me from accessing company information. I hired a forensic accountant who traced the complex web of asset transfers, identifying multiple violations of corporate governance requirements. The final piece fell into place when Amanda discovered that several key documents bearing my electronic signature had been executed while I was demonstrably elsewhere, presenting at a conference in Toronto, meeting clients in Los Angeles, or on a flight to London. Clear evidence of forgery. With my evidence compiled and legal strategy prepared, all that remained was timing the confrontation. The opportunity presented itself when Michael scheduled a board meeting to approve the Chicago expansion, followed by a team lunch to announce the exciting new direction for Clear Vision to key employees. The morning of the board meeting, I dressed with particular care, a navy power suit, subtle makeup, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. Professional, polished, powerful. As I applied lipstick, Michael appeared in the bathroom doorway. "You look especially nice today," he observed. "Special client meeting?" "Just feeling good about the company's direction," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Big day with the Chicago announcement." He kissed my cheek. "I'm glad you're on board. I think you'll be impressed with what we've put together." "I'm sure I will be," I murmured, resisting the urge to wipe his kiss away. The Clear Vision boardroom buzzed with anticipation as executives settled into their chairs. Michael stood, at the head of the table, arranging presentation materials with Daniel at his side. Gregory Phillips, our CFO, distributed financial projections while two other board members, both Michael's appointees, exchanged pleasantries about a recent golf outing. I took my seat quietly, a tablet containing my evidence secured with biometric authentication resting in my lap beneath the table. "Before we begin," Michael announced once everyone was seated, "I want to thank the team for their exceptional work preparing for today's discussion. The Chicago expansion represents a significant milestone in Clear Vision's evolution, and the analysis you're about to see reflects months of strategic planning." He nodded to Daniel, who launched into a polished presentation about technical infrastructure requirements for the new office. Gregory followed with financial projections showing impressive revenue forecasts for Thomson Analytics. The Chicago entity I now understood would operate separately from Clear Vision, while leveraging our technology and client relationships. Throughout their presentations, no one acknowledged that this expansion effectively excluded me from the venture built on my innovation. They spoke as if this were a natural evolution rather than the culmination of a calculated theft. When they finished, Michael turned to me with practiced professionalism. "Jessica, as founder and CEO, would you like to add anything before we vote on the proposal?" "Actually, yes." I opened my tablet and connected it to the conference room display. "I've prepared some additional materials relevant to our discussion." Michael frowned slightly. "This isn't on the agenda." "Consider it an addendum," I replied, pulling up the first slide. A comprehensive chart tracking asset transfers from Clear Vision to Thomson-controlled entities over the previous 18 months. Before we discuss expansion, we should review some concerning patterns in our corporate governance. The room fell silent as the screen displayed transaction flows, highlighting the systematic migration of intellectual property and client contracts to Vertex Solutions and Thomson Digital Holdings, entities unknown to most people in the room except those orchestrating the transfers. "What exactly are we looking at?" asked Martin Reed, one of the independent board members Michael had appointed. "An interesting question," I replied, advancing to the next slide showing incorporation documents for both entities with Daniel and Michael listed as principals. These are companies created by the Thomson family that now own most of Clear Vision's valuable assets, despite no record of proper board approval for such transfers. Daniel's face paled. Gregory shuffled his papers nervously. Michael's expression hardened, his jaw clenching as he realized I had discovered their scheme. "These are internal restructuring decisions made for tax efficiency," he said dismissively. "Standard practice for growing companies. If you had concerns, the appropriate channel would have been to discuss them privately, not ambush the board with out-of-context information." "Out of context?" I pulled up documentation of signatures, executed while I was provably elsewhere. "Would you like to explain how I signed these documents authorizing the transfer of Visutrack's core algorithms to Vertex Solutions while I was giving a keynote address in Toronto? Or perhaps you can clarify why my intellectual property was sold to your brother's company without proper board approval or fair market valuation?" Michael glanced at the other board members, his allies, his installations. I think we should adjourn to discuss these matters privately. Obviously, Jessica has misinterpreted. The board meeting is not adjourned, I interrupted. As CEO and significant shareholder, I have one additional announcement. I displayed the final slide, a notice of emergency action filed with the state that morning. Effective immediately, I have removed Michael and Daniel Thompson from their positions at Clear Vision Marketing pending investigation into corporate malfeasance and potential criminal charges. Their access to company systems and facilities has been terminated. As if on cue, my phone pinged with a notification from our head of security, one of the few executives I had personally hired and who remained loyal to me, confirming that Michael and Daniel's credentials had been deactivated. I had timed the board meeting to coincide precisely with the execution of these measures. "You can't do this," Michael sputtered, his composed facade cracking. The board's composition and recent decisions are compromised by conflicts of interest and potential fraud, I replied calmly. My emergency action, supported by the evidence presented, supersedes board authority until a full investigation is completed. Additionally, I've filed for injunctive relief preventing any further transfer of Clear Vision assets or intellectual property. Martin Reed cleared his throat uncomfortably. Jessica, while these allegations are concerning, proper corporate governance requires proper corporate governance. I opened another document showing the timing of Martin's appointment to the board, followed immediately by the first asset, transfers to Thompson entities. Your appointment, Mr. Reed, coincided with the beginning of these irregular transactions. The timing suggests you may have been installed specifically to facilitate this scheme. Martin's face flushed. That's an outrageous accusation. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but given the pattern of governance violations already documented, the court has granted temporary emergency powers to protect the company's assets pending full investigation. I turned to address the entire room. I suggest we continue this discussion with our respective legal counsel present. In the meantime, Clear Vision staff are expecting an announcement about our future direction. Shall we join them for lunch as planned? The team lunch that followed was surreal. Dozens of employees gathered at an upscale restaurant near the office, excited about the rumored expansion, unaware of the corporate drama unfolding among leadership. Michael, Daniel, Gregory, and I arrived together, maintaining a facade of unity that masked the explosive confrontation that had just occurred. As servers distributed menus, Michael leaned close to whisper, "This is a mistake, Jessica. You're embarrassing yourself and destroying everything we've built." "Everything I built," I corrected quietly, "which you attempted to steal." He straightened, plastering on a practiced smile as he greeted employees at nearby tables. I watched, him working the room, the consummate executive, while I finalized the details of my next move on my phone beneath the table. When the entrees arrived, Michael stood to make the anticipated announcement. Despite everything, he maintained his composure, raising his glass as if nothing had happened. "Before we discuss exciting new developments for Clear Vision, I want to toast our incredible team. Your talent and dedication have brought us to this moment of expansion." His voice carried the same confident authority he had always projected, but I could detect the slight tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes as he scanned the room, calculating how to proceed without revealing the confrontation that had occurred. "Get a team lunch receipt, Susan," I said calmly to our office manager, sliding my corporate card across the table. "I need to step outside for a moment." Michael's face drained of color as I made my way through the crowded restaurant. Behind me, I could hear Daniel's nervous laugh. "What's with her?" The rest of the executive team shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I stood on the busy Seattle sidewalk, rain drizzling onto my blazer, and pulled out my phone. With 3 decisive taps, I froze every company account Michael and Daniel thought they controlled. The notification pinged instantly. "Administrative privileges revoked. Thompson, Michael. Thompson, Daniel." Within seconds, my phone lit up with Michael's desperate call. I declined it, watching through the restaurant window as panic spread across his face. The board meeting scheduled for tomorrow would reveal everything: the shell companies, the diverted contracts, the systematic dismantling of the business I'd built from nothing. My evidence was irrefutable, my timing calculated. As I watched my husband frantically texting his brother, I felt no satisfaction, only a strange, calm certainty. They always did underestimate me, I whispered to myself as I texted our corporate lawyer. Proceed with the documentation as discussed. The aftermath unfolded with dizzying speed. By the time I returned to the table, Michael had received notification from the bank that his access to company accounts had been revoked. His phone continued buzzing with messages from partners and vendors I had contacted, informing them of the leadership changes and ongoing investigation. "What have you done?" he hissed as I calmly took my seat. "Protected what's mine," I replied, turning to address our curious employees. "Everyone, I have an important announcement. Due to some concerning discoveries regarding company governance, Michael and Daniel will be taking a leave of absence effective immediately while we conduct an internal review. As founder and CEO, I'll be resuming direct oversight of all operations. Susan will distribute a formal communication this afternoon, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." The stunned silence that followed was broken by murmurs of confusion. Michael stood abruptly. "This is a temporary misunderstanding. Jessica and I will resolve this privately, and operations will continue normally. Please enjoy your lunch." "There's nothing to resolve," I said firmly, "and nothing about this is normal. Security has already been instructed not to allow Michael or Daniel access to our offices or systems until the investigation is complete." Daniel pushed back from the table, face flushed with anger. "You can't do this. The technology belongs to Vertex Solutions now. We have the documentation." "Forged documentation," I corrected. "Executed without proper authorization. Every transfer is being reversed as we speak." Michael gripped my arm as I stood. "We need to talk. Privately. Now." I removed his hand deliberately. "Our attorneys can handle all communication going forward. I suggest you both leave before this becomes more embarrassing." As they stalked out of the restaurant, I addressed the shocked employees. "I apologize for this disruption. I promise full transparency as we move forward. But for now, all you need to know is that Clear Vision's future is secure. We'll reconvene at the office at 3 o'clock for a company-wide meeting." The hours that followed were a blur of activity. I met with our executive team, minus Gregory, who had abruptly resigned, explaining the situation in careful terms that acknowledged the legal sensitivities while providing necessary context. Our head of security implemented protocols to secure all company data and physical assets. My attorney filed additional documentation with the court to solidify the emergency measures. By late afternoon, the initial shock had transformed into focused action. The company-wide meeting was somber but productive. I explained that an internal audit had uncovered concerning irregularities that required immediate intervention, without detailing the personal betrayal underlying the business issues. Clear Vision was built on innovation, integrity, and transparency, I told the assembled team. Those values will guide us through this transition. I'm personally committed to ensuring the company emerges stronger than before. As employees filed out, many stopped to offer support or ask questions. Their loyalty was heartening, a reminder of the positive culture I had worked so hard to create before the Thompsons began dismantling it. That evening, I returned to the Madison Park House to collect essential belongings, accompanied by a security consultant recommended by my attorney. I had timed my visit to coincide with Michael's scheduled meeting with his lawyers, wanting to avoid a confrontation in what had once been our home. Standing in the master bedroom, packing clothes and personal items, I was struck by how easily the trappings of our married life could be sorted and separated. 5 years reduced to clothing, jewelry, and a few photographs I couldn't bear to leave behind. The security consultant waited discreetly in the hallway as I moved methodically through the space, careful to take only what was indisputably mine. In Michael's office, I retrieved the backup drive containing personal files that I had hidden months earlier, a precaution taken when I first noticed discrepancies in company documentation. As I was about to leave, my eyes fell on a framed photo on his desk, the two of us in the Maldives during our honeymoon, smiling with the turquoise ocean behind us. I left it facing down, a small gesture of finality in a situation spinning beyond anyone's control. The confrontation I had hoped to avoid came the following morning when Michael appeared at my temporary apartment, somehow having obtained the address from a mutual acquaintance. When I opened the door, the composed executive was gone, replaced by a desperate man whose carefully constructed plans were unraveling. "This has gone too far," he said, pushing past me into the living room. "You need to stop the legal proceedings before irreparable damage is done." "The damage was done when you decided to steal my company," I replied, keeping the door open. "Please leave. My attorney advised against direct contact." "Forget the attorneys." Michael ran his hands through his disheveled hair, his typical immaculate appearance noticeably absent. "Jessica, think about what you're doing. These allegations, true or not, will destroy both of us if they become public. The scandal will devastate ClearVision's reputation, tank its value, and for what? Pride? Revenge? For justice," I countered, "and for every entrepreneur who trusts the wrong person." He changed tactics, his voice softening. "We can work this out privately, restructure everything back the way it was. No one needs to know what happened. I already know what happened. I can never unknow it." I maintained my position by the open door. Every moment of our marriage is now in question. Was any of it real, Michael? Or was I just another acquisition target from the beginning? A flicker of what might have been genuine regret crossed his face. "It wasn't like that. Not at first. I did love you, Jessica. But you loved what I built more." I gestured toward the hallway. "Please leave. The security guard downstairs has been instructed not to allow you back into the building." "This isn't finished," he said, his voice hardening as he stepped toward the door. "My family has resources you can't imagine. The Thompsons don't lose. Jessica." "There's a first time for everything," I replied, closing the door as he entered the hallway. The weeks that followed tested every ounce of my resilience. Michael and Daniel, backed by the considerable Thompson family resources, mounted an aggressive legal defense. They claimed the asset transfers had been properly authorized, that I had been fully informed of all corporate restructuring, and that the Chicago venture was intended to benefit ClearVision rather than divert its value. Despite their efforts, the evidence I had gathered proved compelling. Email records showed detailed planning to exclude me from key decisions. Financial transactions documented the systematic transfer of assets for below-market values. Most damning was the proof that multiple authorizing documents bore signatures executed while I was demonstrably elsewhere. 23 days after the initial confrontation, Michael's attorney requested a settlement conference. In a downtown law office with panoramic views of Elliott Bay, I sat across from my husband, brother-in-law, and their legal team, my own. Attorneys flanking me protectively. "My clients recognize that the current situation is untenable for all parties," began Michael's counsel, a silver-haired man with the practiced detachment of someone who had mediated countless high-stakes disputes. "The publicity surrounding these allegations has begun to affect client relationships and Thompson family interests beyond ClearVision. We're prepared to offer a reasonable settlement to resolve matters efficiently." My attorney, Amanda Wilson, raised an eyebrow. "We're listening." The proposal they outlined was telling. Full return of all ClearVision intellectual property and assets in exchange for immunity from criminal prosecution, with a financial settlement that, while substantial, significantly undervalued the company's worth. The clear implication was that the Thompsons feared criminal charges more than financial loss. The offer is inadequate, Amanda replied after a brief consultation with me. Ms. Davis requires complete restoration of all assets, full recovery of diverted revenues, resignation of all Thompson-appointed board members, and comprehensive documentation of every transaction attempted during the period in question. Daniel, who had remained silent until then, leaned forward. The technology has evolved under my direction. VisuTrack as it exists today reflects substantial improvements I personally developed. Using the foundation Jessica created, Amanda countered. Any enhancements you contributed were made as a Clear Vision employee, using company resources, and therefore belong to the company, which rightfully belongs to my client. The negotiations continued for hours, eventually producing an agreement that met most of my requirements while allowing the Thompsons to avoid public humiliation and criminal charges. Michael and Daniel would return all Clear Vision assets and intellectual property, resign from the company permanently, and provide full documentation of all attempted transfers. In exchange, I would not pursue criminal charges or publicly detail the nature of their actions beyond a brief statement about irreconcilable differences in business vision. As we reviewed the final settlement documents, Michael made one last attempt to establish some control. The Chicago market expansion was thoroughly researched and remains viable. The agreement should include a non-compete clause preventing Clear Vision from entering that market for at least 2 years. I looked at him directly, remembering the man I had believed in so completely. No. You don't get to claim any territory after what you've done. I'll expand wherever and whenever I choose. He held my gaze for a moment before nodding slightly to his attorney. The clause was removed, and the settlement finalized. As papers were signed and notarized, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the battle was ending, grief for what had been lost, and a strange emptiness where the future I had once imagined should have been. The divorce proceedings moved forward simultaneously, revealing further financial deceptions. Michael had been diverting our personal funds as well, preparing for a life that increasingly didn't include me. The prenuptial agreement he had insisted was just formality proved invaluable. It protected my business interests while establishing clear separation of assets. When we met for the final divorce mediation, Michael attempted one last manipulation. I was thinking about the Malibu property, he said casually, referring to a beachfront investment we had purchased together. I'd be willing to let you keep it in exchange for removing the documentation requirements from the business settlement. I almost laughed at the transparency of his attempt. No, Michael, the documentation stays. The property will be sold, and proceeds divided according to the prenup. Always the businesswoman, he remarked with a touch of bitterness. Always the opportunist, I countered. After signing the final papers, we stood awkwardly in the law office lobby. 5 years of marriage, concluding with signatures and certificates, rather than the partnership and growth we had once promised each other. For what it's worth, Michael said quietly, not everything was a calculation. There were moments, many moments, that were real. I studied his face, searching for the man I had fallen in love with. The problem is, I'll never know which ones. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Jessica, the Oracle project, it's brilliant. Whatever else happens, you should develop it. I paused, surprised by the genuine admiration in his voice. I intend to. Reclaiming Clear Vision required more than legal victories. The company culture had been damaged by the Thompson influence, with several key employees leaving during the turmoil. Client relationships needed rebuilding, trust had to be reestablished, and the technical architecture Daniel had modified required careful examination to ensure no hidden vulnerabilities remained. I approached these challenges methodically, the same way I had built the company initially. First, I restructured the board with experienced independent directors who understood both technology and proper governance. Then I personally met with our largest clients, transparently explaining the leadership changes while emphasizing the company's renewed commitment to innovation. The technical team conducted a comprehensive review of VisuTrack's architecture, identifying areas where Daniel had introduced dependencies on Vertex solution systems. These were systematically removed and replaced with more robust, independent solutions. In the process, we discovered several backdoors he had created, access points that would have allowed external control of the platform even after ownership. Returned to clear vision. 3 months after the confrontation in the boardroom, I finally felt secure enough to resume development of Oracle, the AI-enhanced version of VisuTrack that Michael and Daniel had tried to suppress. The project quickly became our most promising innovation, combining my original vision with emerging machine learning capabilities to create a truly predictive marketing analytics platform. 1 year after discovering Michael's betrayal, I stood on stage at the same technology conference where we had first met, presenting Oracle to an audience of industry leaders and potential clients. The platform's capabilities exceeded even my initial vision, not just analyzing past marketing performance, but anticipating future consumer behavior patterns and automatically optimizing digital campaigns in real time. As applause filled the room, I felt a profound sense of reclamation, not just of my company, but of my confidence and clarity of purpose. The journey had been brutal, exposing vulnerabilities I hadn't known existed, but the resulting personal growth matched the professional recovery. At the reception following my presentation, I was approached by a distinguished older woman who introduced herself as the CEO of a major retail corporation. "That was impressive technology," she said, studying me with frank assessment. "Even more impressive is how you've navigated recent challenges. The business world has been watching, you know." "I imagine it made for interesting gossip," I replied, maintaining a professional smile. "Not gossip, lessons." She sipped her champagne thoughtfully. "What happened with the Thompsons wasn't unique, unfortunately. The methods were perhaps more sophisticated, but the pattern, men appropriating women's innovations, is depressingly familiar. What was unique was your response. I just protected what was mine, with precision and without publicly destroying anyone, despite ample justification." She handed me her business card. "My company needs that kind of analytics capability, and frankly, that kind of leadership thinking. Call my office next week." As she moved away, I glanced at the card. The CEO of North Star Retail Group, one of the largest potential clients in our industry. The company I had unsuccessfully pursued for partnerships before Michael entered my life. That evening in my hotel room, I reflected on the ironic symmetry. My journey with Michael had begun at this same conference, with his smooth approach after my presentation. It had ended with me reclaiming my professional identity in the same venue, stronger and more successful than before. My phone chimed with a text from Lisa, Clear Vision's new COO, a seasoned executive I had hired to replace Michael, who brought extensive experience and unwavering integrity to the role. Oracle demo generated 12 meeting requests already. Seattle team celebrating. Wish you were here. I smiled, texting back, "Save some champagne for when I return tomorrow." Setting down my phone, I moved to the window overlooking the city. Lights. The woman I had been 5 years earlier, so eager for validation, so vulnerable to Michael's particular brand of manipulative support, seemed like a different person now. The painful lessons of betrayal had transformed me, burning away naivety and leaving behind a clearer understanding of both business and human nature. Clear Vision was thriving, Oracle was launching successfully, and I had emerged not just intact, but enhanced by the crucible of deception and recovery. Michael had taken so much, my trust, my sense of security, years of my life. But he had failed to take the most important things: my company, my vision, and ultimately, my self-determination. Standing at that window, I made a silent promise to myself. I would build Clear Vision into everything I had originally envisioned, but with stronger safeguards and clearer boundaries. I would mentor other women entrepreneurs, sharing what I had learned about protecting their innovations, and I would never again allow anyone, romantic partner or business associate, to position themselves between me and what I had created. The path forward was entirely mine now. No Thompson influence, no compromised board, no subtle undermining of my authority. Just the clear vision that had named my company and would now define my future, on my terms, according to my values, guided by hard-won wisdom. I raised an imaginary glass to the city lights. To lessons learned, I whispered, and to the strength found in surviving them. 6 months after the settlement, I stood in Clear Vision's newly redesigned headquarters, watching employees collaborate in the open concept workspace I had envisioned. Before the Thompson influence pushed us toward traditional corporate layouts, the atmosphere had transformed. Energy had replaced tension, innovation flourished where politics once dominated, and genuine teamwork superseded the hierarchical structure Michael had implemented. The company's recovery had been more rapid than even I had anticipated. Once freed from the constraints of the Thompson approach, Clear Vision returned to its original culture of creativity and collaboration. We rehired several talented employees who had left during Michael's tenure and attracted new talent drawn to our renewed reputation for innovation. Oracle's launch exceeded all projections, generating interest from enterprise clients who had previously considered us too small for their needs. The platform's predictive capabilities provided a competitive advantage no other analytics solution could match, positioning Clear Vision at the forefront of marketing technology just as I had always envisioned. Jessica, my new executive assistant, appeared at my office door. The interview with Tech Innovator is in 10 minutes. They're setting up in the conference room. I nodded, straightening my blazer. The profile piece had been arranged by our site PR team, an opportunity to reshape the public narrative around Clear Vision after months of speculation about the leadership changes and my divorce. While I had maintained professional discretion about the details of Michael's betrayal, the business community inevitably generated rumors. This interview offered a chance to focus attention on our technology rather than corporate drama. The journalist, a thoughtful woman with impressive knowledge of the analytics industry, began with questions about Oracle's development and Clear Vision's growth trajectory. As the conversation progressed, she inevitably steered toward more personal territory. The past year has brought significant changes for both Clear Vision and you personally, she noted. How has navigating those transitions influenced your leadership approach? I considered my response carefully. Challenges reveal what's essential. For Clear Vision, that's our commitment to creating technology that truly empowers marketers rather than overwhelming them with complexity. For me personally, it's reinforced the importance of maintaining direct connection to our core mission and values. And the lessons for other entrepreneurs, particularly women founding tech companies. This question deserved a thoughtful answer. Trust your expertise. Document everything. Build governance structures that protect your innovation, even as you scale. And recognize that true supporters enhance your vision rather than redirecting it. She nodded, making notes. You've restructured your board quite significantly. What guided those changes? Alignment with our core values, I replied. Every board member now brings not only relevant expertise, but demonstrated commitment to ethical governance and respect for founder vision. Clear Vision's leadership should reflect the integrity we promise our clients. After the interview, I walked through the development area where the engineering team was refining Oracle's next phase. Lisa Chen, our new CTO, looked up from her monitor and gestured me over. We've solved that processing bottleneck, she said, displaying a series of performance metrics. The predictive algorithm now runs 42% faster with near-zero latency for real-time applications. I studied the data with genuine appreciation. Lisa had been an early employee who left during Daniel's tenure, uncomfortable with his increasingly controlling approach to development decisions. Her return symbolized the company's revival under authentic leadership. "This is excellent," I acknowledged. "Exactly what enterprise clients need for campaign optimization." Lisa hesitated. "There's something else you should see." She opened another window showing remnants of code embedded deep in VisuTrack's architecture. "We found this during our security audit. It's sophisticated, designed to duplicate data to external servers while evading normal monitoring protocols." I recognized Daniel's coding style immediately. "How widespread?" "It touched 17 core modules," Lisa explained. "We've removed all instances and implemented countermeasures against similar intrusions." "But Jessica," she lowered her voice, "this wasn't amateur work. It was designed to activate 6 months after the settlement, long after our initial security sweep." But the discovery was disturbing but not entirely surprising. The Thompsons' attempt to appropriate my company had been methodical. Why wouldn't their contingency planning be equally thorough? "Document everything," I instructed. "Send the findings to our legal team, but keep this confidential within the security group for now. And Lisa, thank you. This is exactly why I wanted you back." That evening, I sat on the balcony of my new lakefront condominium, reviewing the incident report Lisa had prepared. The spring air carried the scent of blooming cherry trees from the park below, a reminder of life's renewal cycles. My phone chimed with a notification, an email from Robert Thompson, Michael's father. I hesitated before opening it, bracing for hostility or manipulation. Instead, I found a surprisingly direct message. "Jessica, my family has wronged you in ways I'm only beginning to understand. While I can't undo their actions, I would appreciate an opportunity to speak with you directly. No attorneys, no agenda beyond clarity. Robert Thompson." My immediate instinct was to delete the message without response. The Thompson family had done enough damage. Why invite more complexity into my life now that I had finally regained stability? Yet curiosity prevailed. What could Robert possibly want to discuss? Was this another manipulation, or a genuine attempt at what? Reconciliation seemed implausible, accountability unlikely from a family that had orchestrated such a comprehensive betrayal. After careful consideration, I replied with professional detachment. "Mr. Thompson, I can meet briefly next Tuesday morning at Storyville Coffee on Pike Street. 8:30 a.m., Jessica Davis." The coffee shop I selected was deliberately public and near my attorney's office. Precautions that reflected lingering distrust despite my outward composure. When Tuesday arrived, I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a table with clear sightlines to all entrances and exits. Robert Thompson appeared precisely at the appointed time, looking noticeably older than during our last encounter. The commanding presence that had dominated family dinners seemed diminished, his shoulders slightly stooped beneath his expensive overcoat. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "I wouldn't have blamed you for refusing." "Curiosity outweighed caution," I replied. "Though I'm still not certain why you wanted this conversation." Robert was silent for a moment, studying his coffee cup. "I've spent 50 years building Thompson Enterprises on principles of integrity and family loyalty, or so I believed." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "The methods Michael and Daniel employed to appropriate your company violated everything I thought our family stood for. Yet Thompson Family Resources funded their legal defense," I observed. "Yes." His acknowledgement was unflinching. "I initially believed their version of events, that you had agreed to the restructuring, that misunderstandings had escalated through attorney involvement. Patricia was particularly convinced that Michael would never act dishonorably. And now? Now I've seen the evidence they attempted to suppress during settlement negotiations, documentation that never reached family attorneys." He placed a USB drive on the table between us. including these communications between Michael and Daniel planning the systematic transfer of your intellectual property months before they joined Clear Vision. I made no move to take the drive. Why share this with me now? The settlement is finalized. Because you deserve to know the full truth, and because I'm attempting to restore whatever honor remains to the Thompson name. He straightened slightly. Michael and Daniel have been removed from all Thompson enterprises. Patricia refuses to accept their culpability, but she no longer controls family decisions. The revelation was unexpected. I had assumed the Thompson family would close ranks around Michael and Daniel, preserving appearances at all costs. That must have been a difficult decision. Less difficult than facing what their actions reveal about how I raised them. Robert's expression reflected genuine regret. I taught my sons to pursue success aggressively, but never at the expense of principle. Somewhere that message was lost, or perverted into justification for taking what wasn't theirs. We sat in silence for a moment, the ambient cafe noise creating a bubble of privacy around our conversation. Finally, I picked up the USB drive, tucking it into my bag without comment. I don't expect forgiveness, Robert continued, but I wanted you to know that the actions taken against you don't represent the values I tried to instill, and that there have been consequences within our family beyond the legal settlement. What about Vanessa? I asked, referring to the woman Michael had apparently reconnected with during our marriage. Robert looked surprised by the question. She ended their relationship shortly after the settlement became public. Apparently, she found his behavior as reprehensible as I did. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a distant acknowledgement that actions eventually reveal character to everyone, not just their direct victims. There's one other reason I wanted to meet, Robert said, reaching into his briefcase. This belonged to your mother. He placed a small velvet box on the table. Michael took it from your safe deposit box during the marriage. It was among his personal effects when he was removed from the family home. With unsteady hands, I opened the box to find my mother's pendant, a modest sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds that she had worn on special occasions, her one valuable possession that I had inherited after her death. I had noticed its absence months ago but assumed it lost during my hasty departure from the Madison Park house. How did you know it was hers? I asked, my voice barely audible. The inscription, Robert replied. To Ellen, with endless love. I presumed Ellen was your mother. I nodded, closing my fingers around the pendant. This small piece of her, returned unexpected when everything else had been negotiated through attorneys, suddenly mattered more than the entire settlement. Thank you, I said simply. Robert stood, our brief meeting apparently concluded. Oracle is brilliant technology, he said. The industry is taking notice. Whatever else happened between you and my son, your vision was always extraordinary. After he departed, I remained at the table, turning the pendant in my hands and contemplating this unexpected epilogue to the Thompson chapter of my life. The discovery that Michael had taken something so personally precious yet financially insignificant revealed a pettiness that somehow clarified everything else. His betrayal hadn't been merely strategic business maneuvering. It had extended to deliberately inflicting personal pain. 2 weeks later, I stood on stage at the National Marketing Analytics Conference, accepting the Innovator of the Year award for Oracle's revolutionary approach to predictive campaign optimization. The industry recognition validated not just the technology, but the resilience required to bring it to market despite extraordinary obstacles. Innovation thrives on perspective, I told the audience during my acceptance speech. Sometimes the clearest vision emerges after periods of obscurity. At Clear Vision Marketing, we've learned that constraints can become catalysts when approached with creativity and determination. The careful wording acknowledged our company's challenging journey without revealing private details. As I concluded my remarks, I noticed a familiar figure in the audience. Patricia Thompson, seated near the back, watching with an unreadable expression. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, her presence an unexpected reminder of how thoroughly my life had intersected with the Thompson family. After the ceremony, I was approached by numerous industry leaders interested in partnership opportunities. ClearVision's prominence had grown dramatically since Oracle's launch, attracting acquisition offers from major technology firms that I consistently declined. The company wasn't merely successful now, it was transformative, reshaping how enterprises understood and leveraged marketing data. Back in Seattle, I implemented the governance structures I wished I had established before meeting Michael. ClearVision's new operating agreement included robust protections for intellectual property, transparent decision-making protocols, and safeguards against the kind of stealth restructuring the Thompsons had attempted. The board now included 2 experienced female technology executives who understood both the business challenges and the unique obstacles women founders often faced. My personal life had stabilized as well, though differently than I once envisioned. The lakefront condominium offered serene views and welcome privacy after the turmoil of recent years. I had developed new friendships outside the business community. A book club, volunteer work with girls interested in technology careers, weekend hiking with a group devoted to exploring Washington's wilderness areas. Dating remained in the future tense, a possibility I wasn't ready to explore, while still processing the profound breach of trust my marriage had represented. Some wounds required time before testing their healing. On the anniversary of the boardroom confrontation, I gathered ClearVision's leadership team for a strategic planning retreat at Woodinville Wine Country. As we reviewed the company's remarkable growth trajectory and outlined objectives for the coming year, I felt a profound sense of restoration, not just of what had been threatened, but of what might now be possible without artificial constraints. Let's discuss Oracle's next evolution, I suggested as we concluded our review of current projects. The predictive capabilities we've developed could extend beyond marketing to other business functions. Lisa nodded enthusiastically. We've already seen clients adapting our analytics framework for supply chain optimization and talent management. There's tremendous potential for cross-functional application. The conversation flowed with energy and purpose, ideas building, upon ideas in the collaborative atmosphere that had always been ClearVision's greatest strength. As sunlight streamed through the vineyard's windows, illuminating animated faces and filled whiteboards, I recognized the stark contrast with the rigid, hierarchical meetings Michael had instituted. That evening, walking alone among the vineyard, Rose, I called my oldest friend Mia, who had supported me through the darkest moments of the Thompson betrayal. "How does it feel?" she asked when I described the day's productive sessions. "Running the company entirely on your terms again?" I considered the question carefully. Like finding something precious I thought was lost forever, but discovering it's actually more valuable than before. Because of what you learned in the process? Exactly. The Thompson experience was brutal, but the aftermath has been clarifying. I understand now what governance truly means, how to protect innovation without stifling it, and most importantly, how to trust my instincts about both people and opportunities. Later that night, standing on the balcony of my retreat cottage, I fastened my mother's pendant around my neck. The sapphire caught the moonlight, a small but significant reminder of resilience inherited across generations. My mother had faced her own betrayals and emerged stronger, raising me alone after my father's abandonment, building a meaningful career despite limited opportunities, facing cancer with courage that still humbled me when I recalled her final months. "I understand better now," I whispered to her memory, touching the pendant. "What you tried to teach me about self-reliance and clear-eyed assessment of people's actions rather than their words." The company I had reclaimed was flourishing beyond my original vision, its potential expanding in directions I could now explore without interference or manipulation. The painful lessons of betrayal had ultimately strengthened both ClearVision's foundation and my own judgment. Where Michael had seen vulnerability to exploit, He had inadvertently created resilience that now defined both the company and its founder. I had lost a husband but regained myself, a trait that, in retrospect, represented tremendous value. The path forward was entirely mine to determine, guided by hard-earned wisdom and a vision clearer than ever before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.